right. Good evening. We are talking about what to do if you are experiencing physical workplace violence. That's what's on the agenda for today. And so Tuesday we talked about forms of physical violence, and tonight we're going to talk about specific steps you can take if you are experiencing it or have or might in the future. And one of the things I think is really important, and I said this again on Tuesday, is that you have to expect that it will happen when you're in a workplace bullying situation in some form, okay? In some form. So that's the first thing you have to do, is to say, okay, that there is a possibility that this could and probably will happen at some point. And then the second step is you again, of course, whenever physical violence or any workplace violence happens, you're going to want to document that, okay? And I think it's particularly important when it comes to, especially if somebody has grabbed your arm, physically blocked your way, put their body in front of yours so you can't get out, those sorts of things, to get as many details down as possible and as specific details as possible, okay? And the other thing I think is, again, critical in these situations is that you have thought about the possibilities ahead of time and that you have a plan of action to get out of those situations quickly. So I highly recommend that you develop some sort of safety plan, right? And a safety plan is just, again, what to do if or when this happens. Okay, so again, go back through your documentation and figure out when you are most at risk. When is it likely that something might escalate into an altercation of physical violence? Okay, and then figure out how you can get out of it. So just some things that are really important is, and I mentioned some of these things when I experienced physical workplace violence, is I didn't sit with my back to the door, right? So like right now I'm in my office and the door is over there. I would never sit with my back towards the door. I would always sit so that I could easily get up and make it to the door and get out quickly. Okay, I wouldn't turn my back on anybody you thought might be the person who is going to engage in physical violence. The other thing, as don't have as many witnesses around you as possible at all times if necessary. Okay, so again, like I would never have gone or done anything alone with the social worker who engaged in physical violence against me. Okay, I didn't even like being in the same building that they were in. Okay, so think about those kinds of scenarios. So if you are in a meeting, can you get out quickly, right? So again, when you're going and doing things, make sure that again, for lack of a better term, escape routes to get out and escape. The other thing too is it's really important to learn de-escalation techniques, right? So again, keeping your voice tone, not necessarily monotone, but being able to keep it at a lower tone of voice and staying grounded and those sorts of things so that you don't escalate things, right? You also want to make sure that you have techniques to get out of situations quickly. I refer to these as just escape plans, right? And these are essentially just ways that you can get out of a situation quickly without anybody like raising any eyebrows, right? So it just seems like it's something normal in your normal workday, but nobody knows that you're using it as an excuse to get out of this situation of bullying. Okay, so for example, if somebody if somebody does block you into your office, right? If somebody comes in, okay, and like if somebody came into my office and they were standing in the door over there, right? How can I get out of this situation quickly so that I'm not in the um, space where a physical altercation could happen, right? So how do I get my body around their body at the door, right? So one thing that I used to do is when I would hear people coming down the hallway, and I say people, I mean the bully. What I would do is sometimes, especially if I sensed that they were going to come in and bully me, what I would do is I would grab my briefcase and my purse and my phone, and I would say, "Hey, so and so, I see that you were coming down to talk to me, but you know what? I have a meeting, and actually, I'm a couple minutes late. I'm going to go to that meeting. I'm going to come back and I'll meet you in your office when I'm done." Okay? And so sometimes I would just literally go grab a cup of coffee and go do something else outside of my building, and so that it looked like I was doing normal everyday things, but it was a way for me to get out of that situation without raising any eyebrows. Okay. So there's a lot of things like that you can do. Sometimes if I heard somebody coming down, I'd pick the phone up. I've had a lot of one-way conversations with myself when a bully has been coming down the hallway and stepped into my office, and I would just start talking up to myself on the phone as if I was talking to someone else, so that they would know that first off I had an quote unquote another witness here on the phone and that I was busy. Okay. The other thing you can do is if you're in the hallway and somebody is blocking you or is getting, invading your personal space, if you see somebody walk by, you can say, "Oh, hey, uh, Sarah, I need to talk to you," and then say, "Excuse me, I really have to talk to Sarah," and then boom, get out. Okay? So there's a lot of ways. Again, make it conducive to your workplace, what seems like quote unquote normal business. I think I've told you this before. I'm diabetic. So one thing I use, first off, I would just say, my blood sugar is dropping. I've got to get to my office to get some, I've got to get some lifesavers or some glucose sugar tablets because my blood sugar is dropping. And, it's hard to argue with some of those kinds of things. So have those escape routes and those ways to get out of difficult situations. Okay. And the most important thing when it comes to thinking about physical workplace violence in advance, your safety is the most important. Remember, you're the most important person in the workplace, and you matter, and you're important, and your safety, your emotional safety, and your physical safety is really, really important. Okay, so make sure that you're documenting. You're making sure that you're not in places where they can, box you in or those kinds of things. Make sure you have witnesses around if at all possible. And again, when I say witnesses, I mean trustworthy people who will back you up, not people who will back up the bully. Okay? And I know sometimes in a bully culture that's just not at all possible. Okay? But again, when there's more people around, the better it is, I think, for your safety. Okay? That's not always the case. Okay? The other thing I think too is if you think they're things like this, if you think they're coming into your office and messing with um, your professional items or your personal things that you have on your desk, take pictures of those, right? And if you have to do that every night, you have to do that every night. Okay, because that's a way that you can document that, hey, this is the way I left my office, and look here, it's time stamped. And then I came in here at such and such, again, take another picture, it's time stamped, so that you can then, show that you had, a picture of your family over here, and now that picture is gone. Okay. We have a lot of access to technology that we need to use to document and make sure that you're safe and that you're able to document what's happening using technology like screenshots and all of those kinds of things, I think are really important to use if you can. Okay. The other thing I think. Okay, so now let's switch gears for just a little bit. Okay, so you have to take steps ahead of time to protect yourself, but what do you do if it happens, right? What do you do if physical violence, physical workplace violence happens to you? Okay, well, the first thing, again, it depends right on what it is, right? So if somebody is taking things from your mailbox, okay, and those are confidential files or something that's confidential or something that you really need to do your job, and those things, right, are missing, that's different than if somebody grabs you by the arm and leaves a mark, or if somebody, gets right into your face, right up next to you, or even like what I had is somebody charging around the table. Okay, it depends on the level of violence it is. But here are some things that you could and probably should do. You definitely, in cases where there's physical violence, I recommend going up the chain of command, even if nothing happens, right? Just having and documenting everything that's done, every step of the way. Who said what did you do, when did you move it to the next level, when did you move it to the next level. So you definitely want to report in-house, okay? But the other thing, that's not the only mechanism for reporting, okay? And so, for example, if somebody grabs you and leaves a physical mark, right? I would report that to the police, right? There has to be some line in the sand where you say, this is enough is enough, and that's physical assault. They grabbed me, they pulled me, I have marks to show on my body about that, and that is a physical assault, right? People can't assault you, that's illegal, okay? And the other thing, so I would report to the police, even if they don't do anything, it's on the record that you reported, okay? That and you filed a police report. That's important, okay? That's really important. The other thing you can do is if people are licensed, okay? If it's a doctor, if it's a teacher, if it's a social worker, if it's a counselor, if it's, whatever, nurse, whatever their license it is, if they are licensed through a professional association or organization, you can report them to the licensure board, and I highly recommend that you do. Right? I didn't do that. In retrospect, I wish I would have done two things: filed a police report and reported this person to the licensing board, right? And so I think that, again, because when you file for, depending on the licensing board, whatever, but some of them, those complaints go on the record, and they're on the website for that person forever. Okay, and so I think when your organization isn't going to do anything, and oftentimes when it comes to physical workplace violence, they do nothing, then you have to then take it outside, okay? And I think that's really important. Now, again, whenever you do anything like that, you have to think about the repercussions, okay? But I think it's really, really important that, especially depending on the level of workplace violence, that you do in fact report it to the police, report it to their licensing board, and I do think it's important that you take it up the chain of command and report it to the top person that you possibly can. Okay, again, it doesn't mean that anybody's going to do anything, but I still think it's important that when it comes to physical workplace violence, that we really have to just say, we're not putting up with that, okay? And I think the most important thing when it comes to taking action against physical workplace violence is that you really, really think about yourself and your well-being ahead of time. don't, when it comes to physical violence, be proactive about the steps that you're going to take if and when it happens. And I think that in and of itself is, if you develop a safety plan, so have security on that safety plan, have numbers of people that you can contact. You know, who's your go-to person? You know, if you have a therapist, put their number on there, that you carry that with you at all times. And you know, there are places that maybe you can go in the workplace. Maybe there are places you won't go by yourself, and that's okay. But it's important that you think about what if beforehand, so that you've developed these plans, developed a strategy that when it happens, or if it happens, you can go into action just like this, and you don't have to think about, oh my gosh, how do I get out of here? What am I going to do? You've thought about what you can do, and it'll come right back to you, and you can take that action. That's really, really, really important. Okay, and learning some effective de-escalation techniques are really helpful as well. And so again, if you need to, or you've been in these situations where you have had workplace violence, physical workplace violence, and you don't know what to do, what you can do is you can reach out to me directly, and maybe we can brainstorm some ideas about making sure that your well-being is safe. Okay, and I want you to remember this, because I think when it comes to physical workplace violence, that takes an emotional toll on us. Workplace bullying and workplace abuse is traumatic. This adds another layer. So again, making sure that you're protected, your emotional well-being is protected, that you have a support system, you have people who believe you, and if and when that happens, that you can reach out and talk to somebody to make sure that you know that you're okay and you're important. Okay, nobody should experience physical violence. Nobody at work should experience physical violence, and that includes you. Okay. All right. Well, I hope that helps. I hope you never experience physical violence. But if you do, I hope these steps help. And I hope you have a great weekend. And I'll see you next Tuesday.